There's a special kind of pain that comes when the people you trust most are the ones who destroy you. When family stops meaning love and starts meaning betrayal. For years, Laura Bennett believed that blood was thicker than water. She built her life around that belief, working long hours, taking care of her late father's business, and supporting her younger siblings after their mother passed away. Everything she did was for them. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every penny saved, but greed as a way of changing people. It started when her father's will was read. The business, the small construction company Laura had helped him build from the ground up, was supposed to be divided fairly among the siblings. That's what she'd always been told. But when the lawyer handed her the papers, Laura's heart stopped. Her name wasn't there. Everything, from the company to the house she grew up in, had been signed over to her younger brother and his wife, both of whom swore they didn't know how it happened. They took her inheritance. They took her home. They even took her father's truck, the one she used to ride in as a kid when he taught her how to work hard and stay honest. Overnight, Laura went from business partner to outsider, but betrayal has a strange way of revealing truth. And when the lies began to unravel, what came to light would shake the entire family and prove that sometimes karma doesn't need an invitation to show up. Because in the end, the truth doesn't hide forever. It waits quietly, patiently, until it's ready to burn everything built on deceit. Stay until the end, because this isn't just a story about loss. It's a story about justice, and how one woman rebuilt her life from the ashes of betrayal. And if you believe that no matter how dark things get, truth always finds its way, subscribe. Because here on Justice Found, every story reminds us that karma never sleeps. The lawyer's office smelled like old paper and disappointment. The air was thick, heavy with the kind of silence that follows the death of someone who meant everything. Laura sat in the corner of the long mahogany table, her hands clenched together, her eyes fixed on the framed photo of her father that rested on the desk. He had been gone barely 3 weeks, and yet here they were, his 3 children and a lawyer she barely knew, about to decide what pieces of him they would take. Across from her sat Evan, her younger brother, in a perfectly ironed shirt and forced solemnity. Next to him, his wife Megan, a woman who never missed an opportunity to smile at Laura like she was a charity case. Laura took a deep breath as the lawyer, Mr. Holloway, cleared his throat. "Your father's will was updated 6 months ago," he began. "It outlines the division of his estate and the ownership of his company, Bennett Construction." Laura's chest swelled with pride at the name. That company had been her life. She'd worked there since college. Not because she had to, but because she loved it. Her father used to say, "You build more than houses, Laura. You build trust." The lawyer continued reading, and for a moment everything sounded fair. The house, the savings, the company, all to be divided equally. But then something shifted in his tone. He flipped to a second page and paused. "However," he said slowly, "this version of the will supersedes all previous documents." Laura frowned. "What does that mean?" Mr. Holloway adjusted his glasses. "According to this updated will, full ownership of Bennett Construction and all assets associated with it will be transferred to your brother, Evan Bennett." Laura blinked. "That can't be right. My father would never—" "There's more," the lawyer interrupted gently. "The property, the vehicles, and the financial accounts are also transferred to him. There is, however, a small personal trust, $5,000 left to you." Her heart dropped. $5,000. Not even enough to cover the funeral costs she had paid. Evan looked down at his hands, feigning discomfort. Megan reached over and placed a manicured hand on his arm. "Laura, I know this must be hard for you," she said softly. "But maybe Dad wanted to reward Evan for taking over the finances last year." "The finances?" Laura's voice cracked. "I was the one running payroll. I was the one managing the clients, the contracts, Mr. Holloway cleared his throat again. "Ms. Bennett, I understand this is upsetting, but the will appears to be legally binding. Your father signed it in the presence of witnesses." Laura stared at him, the room spinning. Her father couldn't have done this. 6 months ago, he was healthy, working side by side with her on the site, laughing, planning expansions. He had never mentioned changing anything. Her gaze shifted to Evan. His face was too calm, too prepared. She felt the truth stir in her gut like a slow, cold wave. After the meeting, she stepped outside into the late afternoon sun, the sound of city traffic faint in the distance. Evan followed her out, pretending concern. "Laura, listen," he started. "Dad talked to me about this before he got sick. He said you were already doing fine, and I needed the company more. He didn't want you to worry." Her hands trembled. "You're lying," he sighed. "You're emotional right now. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw it. The flicker of guilt, the satisfaction hiding behind his calm. She took a step closer. "I was the one who kept that business alive when you were skipping shifts and losing clients. Don't tell me what Dad wanted," he smirked faintly. "Then prove it." The words hit her like a slap. He walked away with his arm around Megan, leaving her standing there in the middle of the parking lot, holding a copy of the will that felt more like a knife. As she stared at the paper, one detail stood out in the corner: the date. 6 months ago, the same week her father was hospitalized for the stroke that left him unable to speak for nearly a month. Her jaw tightened. Something was wrong. She folded the document slowly, her voice trembling but firm. "If you forged my father's signature," she whispered to herself, "I'll find out." That night, Laura pulled out her father's old briefcase, the one she'd kept locked away since the funeral. Inside, she found the original draft of his will, unsigned, incomplete, and with her name still listed as co-owner of Bennett Construction. Laura sat at her kitchen table long after midnight, the faint hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. The old briefcase lay open in front of her, its worn leather edges soft from years of use. Inside, her father's handwriting filled pages, neat, deliberate, the kind of penmanship that spoke of pride and precision. The original draft of his will was there. Her name was written clearly, beside her brother's, under joint ownership of Bennett Construction. The document was dated only a week before his stroke. Her pulse quickened. 6 months ago, he couldn't even hold a pen. Laura grabbed her phone, snapping photos of every page. Then she compared them to the copy of the final will she'd been given. The difference was glaring. Her father's signature on the second document looked off, too smooth, too perfect. Her father had a small tremor in his right hand even before the stroke, but this one was flawless. Her father's lawyer, Mr. Holloway, had said there were witnesses. Laura flipped through the file until she found their names. She didn't recognize them. 2 names, 2 signatures. Both looked like they'd been written by the same person. Her chest tightened. She pushed back from the table, pacing the kitchen. If she accused Evan without proof, she'd look desperate, bitter. He'd call her jealous, emotional, the favorite daughter trying to rewrite the truth. But if she found real evidence, if she could prove forgery... She opened her laptop and began searching. Legal forums, probate laws, forgery detection services. At 2:17 a.m., she found a small firm in Boston that specialized in handwriting analysis. She sent an email with both documents attached and wrote only one line: "Please tell me which signature is real." Days passed. Laura couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every time she saw Evan's name on her phone, her blood boiled. He called once, pretending to check in. She didn't answer. By the 3rd day, she received a reply from the analyst. "Ms. Bennett, the signature on the second will show multiple signs of digital replication and ink inconsistency. It is almost certainly forged. Call me when you can." Her knees went weak. She read it again, her heart pounding so hard it echoed in her ears. Her brother had stolen everything, but she couldn't go straight to the police. If she did, he'd bury her under legal threats before the truth surfaced. She needed to move quietly, smartly, the way her father would have. She printed the analyst's report and slid it into a folder labeled Evidence. Then she called the one person she still trusted at Bennett Construction. Frank Miller, her father's old foreman, a man who'd worked for her family for 20 years. When he answered, his voice was rough from years of shouting over heavy machinery. "Laura, it's been a while. I need your help," she said. "Something's wrong with Dad's will," Frank sighed. "I figured as much. Evan's been running the company into the ground since he took over. Cutting corners, losing contracts. It's a mess, Frank. Did Dad ever talk about changing his will?" A pause. "No. Last I heard, he said you and Evan would share everything 50-50. He even told me you'd probably take the lead when he retired." Laura's grip on the phone tightened. "Then why would he sign a new will a week after his stroke?" Frank swore under his breath. He couldn't even hold a pen after that. "Evan was the one bringing papers in and out of the hospital. Said it was billing stuff." Laura closed her eyes. "Frank, would you testify to that if it came to it?" "I'd swear it on my life," he said. That night, Laura sat in her car outside the office she used to run. Through the glass doors, she saw Evan's reflection pacing inside, phone to his ear, looking like he owned the world. He didn't see her parked across the street. She watched him for a long moment, anger twisting into resolve. If her father had taught her anything, it was this: a foundation built on lies doesn't stand forever. She drove home and opened a new document on her laptop. At the top, she typed, "Operation The Truth." The next morning, she called Mr. Holloway. "I'd like to schedule a meeting," she said evenly. "But this time I'd like to bring an independent attorney." He hesitated. "Of course, Miss Bennett. May I ask why?" She smiled to herself. "Because I think someone rewrote my father's will, and I intend to prove it." That evening, as she reviewed her notes, Laura received an email with no sender ID. Just one line of text: "Stop digging. Laura, you're not ready for what you'll find." Laura stared at the message glowing on her screen, her pulse hammering in her throat. "Stop digging, Laura. You're not ready for what you'll find." No sender. No signature. Just a warning that felt too personal to be random. She took a shaky breath, reread it 3 times, and then glanced at the clock. 11:42 p.m. Her apartment was silent, the kind of silence that presses against the walls. She looked toward the window. The curtains were drawn, but she felt watched, as if the darkness outside was listening. Her first instinct was to delete the message, pretend it was a prank. But the phrasing, "You're not ready," sounded like someone who knew her. Someone close. Evan. She printed the email, slid it into the evidence folder, and double-checked the locks before sitting back at her desk. Her hands shook as she opened her notes again. If they were trying to scare her, it meant she was close. The next morning, she drove to meet her new attorney, Dana Patel, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 40s who had built a reputation for dismantling forged estate claims. Dana studied the documents in silence for a few minutes, flipping between the old and new wills. "This signature analysis is strong," she said finally. "But the real gold here is the timeline. Your father's stroke date, the document date, and the witnesses, they don't add up. You think it's enough to open a case?" Dana nodded. "Absolutely. But you need to be careful. If your brother's desperate enough to forge legal documents, he's desperate enough to destroy evidence, or anyone who threatens him." Laura's heart sank. "I think he already knows I'm looking." She slid the printed email across the table. Dana's eyes narrowed. "You save this?" "Of course." "Good. We'll trace the IP." She typed quickly into her laptop, then froze. "This was sent from inside the Bennett Construction Network." Laura's stomach dropped. "From the company?" "From someone sitting at one of their computers." Her voice trembled. "Then it was him." "Maybe," Dana said carefully. "Or someone covering for him. Either way, this just went from civil to criminal." That afternoon, Laura drove to her father's old office, now Evan's. She parked a block away and watched from her car. Evan was pacing again, arguing on the phone, his gestures sharp and angry. She snapped a photo through the windshield, capturing his face mid-sentence, his expression twisted in frustration. Then she saw her chance. When he left, he tossed a stack of papers into the outside trash bin before driving off. Laura waited until his car disappeared down the street. Then, feeling her father's voice in the back of her mind, "Sometimes to build, you've got to get your hands dirty." She climbed out and opened the bin. Her fingers trembled as she sorted through envelopes, wrappers, and receipts. until she found a crumpled piece of paper with a notary stamp. She smoothed it out. It was a draft copy of the new will, the one that had supposedly been filed months ago. But this version had blank witness lines and a sticky note attached that read, "Need to finalize before next week. Evan says Holloway can arrange it." Her breath caught. Holloway, the lawyer who'd read the will. If this note was real, then Holloway wasn't just careless. He was involved. She photographed everything, folded the page back carefully, and drove straight to Dana's office. Dana read it, her eyes narrowing. If this is legit, it ties both of them to the forgery. We can subpoena Holloway's records, get the notary's testimony, and bring this to the district attorney. Laura felt tears burn behind her eyes, not of sadness, but of relief. "You mean I can finally clear my father's name?" Dana smiled faintly. "Not just clear it. You can expose the people who tried to erase it." That night, Laura returned home, feeling lighter for the first time in months. But when she opened her door, the feeling vanished. Her apartment smelled faintly of smoke. She froze. On the floor, near her desk, lay her evidence folder, torn open, pages scattered. The flash drive with her documents was missing. Her breath hitched. She ran to her desk, checked her laptop. Gone. On the wall, scrawled in black marker above her father's framed photo, were 3 words. "You were warned." Laura stumbled back, heart pounding. Staring at the words, she wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. She was in danger. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands and called Dana. "They broke in," she whispered. "They took everything." Dana's voice on the other end was calm but urgent. "Then listen to me carefully, Laura. We go to the police, now." "But there's something you should know first." Laura swallowed hard. "What?" Dana paused. "Holloway died last night. Car accident. They're calling it suspicious." The police station smelled like coffee and exhaustion. Laura sat in a cold metal chair, her hands clasped together to keep them from shaking. The adrenaline from the break-in had worn off, leaving behind a deep, hollow dread that pressed against her ribs. Detective Marcus Hale, a tall man with the kind of calm authority that came from years of seeing too much, sat across from her. His eyes were steady but sympathetic. "So let me get this straight," he said. "Your father's lawyer dies in a car crash, and the same night someone breaks into your apartment and steals the evidence of a forged will." Laura nodded, her voice hoarse. "Yes, and whoever did it left a message." He looked up from his notes. "A message?" She slid the photo she had taken of her wall across the table. The words, "You were warned," stared back in thick black ink. Marcus frowned. "That's not random vandalism. That's intimidation. It's my brother," she said, her voice cracking. "It has to be." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "Maybe. But if what you're saying is true, there's more than one person involved. Lawyers don't risk their careers forging documents for free. Someone else helped him." Laura's mind flashed to the note she found in the trash. "Evans says Holloway can arrange it." She looked up. "Detective, if Holloway's dead, that note might be the only thing left to prove what they did." Marcus nodded. "Then we find it before they do." By that evening, Laura was back in Dana's office, pacing. Dana had called her earlier that afternoon with news. "They ruled Holloway's death an accident," Dana said grimly, "but the report doesn't add up. No skid marks, no brake lights. It's like he drove straight into the barrier without even trying to stop." Laura's heart pounded. "You think someone silenced him?" "I think whoever forged your father's will realized Holloway was a liability. And now they're cleaning house." Dana pulled out a printed email chain between Holloway and a notary public. "I got this through an old paralegal friend. Holloway sent an unsigned version of the will 2 days after your father's stroke. He said, 'Need to complete signatures per Evans' instructions.' That's not a request from a client. That's an order from someone pulling strings." Laura stared at the page. "Evan?" Dana nodded. "We have enough to build a case for fraud and possible conspiracy, but we'll need to move fast before your brother finds out what we have left." The next morning, Detective Hale called. "Miss Bennett, I think we found something you should see. Meet me at your father's old office." Laura's stomach knotted as she drove. The building looked smaller now, stripped of the warmth her father used to bring to it. Evan's car wasn't there, but 2 patrol units were parked outside. Inside, Hale and his team were combing through filing cabinets. "What's going on?" she asked. Hale motioned her over. "We got a warrant. We've been searching for financial records connected to the company. You were right. There's something off." He opened a drawer and pulled out a stack of ledgers. Every page was meticulously neat, too neat. "These numbers are doctored. Transfers to shell accounts under fake names. And take a look at this." He flipped to a page marked Consulting Services. The payee was a name that made Laura's blood run cold. Megan Holloway, her brother's wife. Hale's voice was low. "Your sister-in-law's maiden name wasn't Holloway, was it?" "No," Laura whispered. "It's Coleman." "Then this isn't coincidence," Hale said. "Your brother was paying her under an alias, the same alias used by the lawyer who forged the documents." Laura staggered back. "She was part of it. Looks that way. And if we can tie these payments to the forgery, we'll have enough to charge both of them." That night, Laura sat alone in her car outside Evan's mansion, the same one he'd bought with her father's money. Through the window, she could see Megan laughing with guests, champagne glasses clinking, music playing. They looked untouchable, but they weren't, not anymore. Her phone buzzed, a message from Detective Hale. "The DA's ready. We'll move tomorrow morning," Laura exhaled slowly. The night was still, heavy, full of the weight of what was coming. For months they had stolen her peace, her reputation, her inheritance. Tomorrow she'd take back something bigger, the truth. The next morning, as dawn crept through the blinds, Laura's phone rang again. This time from Dana. Her voice was sharp, urgent. "Laura, don't go anywhere. Hale's on his way to you." "Something happened." Laura froze. "What?" Dana hesitated. "Evan and Megan, they're gone. The police got to their house at 6, empty. No cars, no phones. They disappeared sometime in the night." Laura's breath caught. "They ran?" "Yes," Dana said. "And that means they know." As Laura hung up, her eyes fell to her front door. An envelope had been slid under it. No stamp, no return address. She picked it up slowly, her hands trembling. Inside was a single photograph. It was her father, set in his hospital bed, signing a document with Evan standing behind him, smiling at the camera. But scrawled across the photo in black ink were 4 chilling words: "We finished what he started." Laura's hands went cold as she stared at the photo. Her father's weak hand holding a pen, Evan's smug grin behind him, and those words, "We finished what he started." Her mind raced. It wasn't possible. Her father hadn't been conscious enough to sign anything after the stroke. That picture wasn't proof of his consent. It was proof of manipulation. Proof that Evan had staged everything. She called Detective Hale immediately. "They left me a photo," she said, her voice trembling. "It's them. Evan and Megan. It's from the hospital." Hale's voice was calm but tight. "Don't touch it. I'll send someone to collect it." "Where are you right now?" "In my apartment. Stay there, lock your doors, and don't open them for anyone but my team. If they're desperate, they might try to intimidate you again." Laura hung up and checked the locks, heart hammering. The quiet of the apartment felt oppressive now. The clock ticked too loud. The shadows looked too deep. Her phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. "You should have walked away, Laura. You were never supposed to find out." Her chest tightened. Her fingers shook as she typed back, "Where are you?" No answer. A moment later, her apartment lights flickered, once, twice, then everything went dark. For a few seconds, the silence was absolute. Laura's breath came shallow, her ears straining for sound. Then faintly, she heard it. The soft creak of the fire escape outside her window. She moved quietly, grabbing her phone and crouching low. The flashlight illuminated the edges of the room, the table, the shattered glass of a frame knocked over, her father's picture lying face down. She dialed Hale again. "Someone's here," she whispered. "Stay calm. Officers are 2 minutes out. Hide somewhere safe." Laura ducked into her bedroom closet, clutching her phone against her chest. Through the crack in the door, she saw the faint beam of a flashlight sweeping across her living room. Footsteps, slow, careful. Her pulse roared in her ears. The footsteps stopped right outside her bedroom. A low voice said, "She's not here." Then another voice, Megan's. "She's smarter than you think." "Evan, check the back." Laura froze. Megan, she was here too. The front door suddenly slammed open. A crash, followed by shouts. "Police, drop it!" There was a scuffle. Then silence. Laura stumbled out, blinking against the flashlights now flooding her apartment. Hale stood near the doorway, gun drawn, his face set in stone. Two officers had Evan pinned against the wall, his hands behind his back. Megan stood near the couch, her expression blank. Not afraid, not angry, just empty. Hale looked at Laura. "You okay?" She nodded weakly, still shaking. "You got them?" He glanced at the officers. "Not yet. Let's hear what they have to say." At the station, Evan sat across from her in the interrogation room, handcuffed and furious. Hale stood behind the glass, watching. "You think you've won?" Evan sneered. "You think this will bring him back?" "Dad knew I was the one meant to lead." "You were never." Laura leaned forward, her voice low and steady. "Dad didn't leave you anything. You took it. You forged his will. You stole his company. And now you've lost everything because you couldn't stand to share." Evan laughed bitterly. "You were always the favorite. I just evened the score by erasing me." He looked away, jaw tight. "By surviving," Laura exhaled, her anger turning to sadness. "No, Evan, you didn't survive. You just destroyed yourself one lie at a time." Outside the glass, Hale motioned to the officer beside him. "He's done. Get him out of here." Later that night, as the paperwork was being processed, Hale walked Laura to the parking lot. The night air felt lighter, cold but freeing. "They'll both be charged," he said. "Forgery, fraud, and attempted intimidation. You'll get the company back, the house, everything that was yours." Laura nodded slowly. "I don't care about the money anymore. I just wanted the truth." Hale gave a faint smile. "And you got it." She looked up at the stars, her father's words echoing in her mind. "You build more than houses, Laura. You build trust." For months, that trust had been shattered. But tonight, she felt the first hint of rebuilding. When she got home, she found one last envelope taped to her door. Inside was a single note, scrawled in a familiar, shaky hand. "You did what I couldn't. You protected what mattered." "Dad!" Her eyes filled with tears. She pressed the note to her chest, whispering into the quiet, "I hope you're proud of me." As she turned to go inside, her phone buzzed again, this time from Dana. "Laura, you need to see the news. They found another forged will in Holloway's safe. It's not just your family, Laura. There are dozens more." Laura stood frozen on her doorstep, the weight of Dana's words sinking in like cold steel. Dozens more. Her story wasn't an isolated betrayal. It was part of something bigger, darker, and deeper than she ever imagined. She rushed inside, turned on the TV, and flipped to the local news. The anchor's voice was calm, but every sentence hit like a blow. Authorities have uncovered a series of forged wills linked to the late attorney Charles Holloway. Investigators believe the scheme involved multiple beneficiaries across several states, all of whom profited illegally after the deaths of elderly clients. The full scale of the fraud remains under investigation. Laura sank onto the couch, numb. The screen flashed photos of Holloway, his office, and stacks of confiscated documents, all marked evidence. And then she saw it, the logo of Bennett Construction, printed at the bottom of one of the fake wills, her company, her father's name. This wasn't just her family's tragedy, it was proof that Bennett Construction had been used as a front, a financial pipeline for laundering money from the forgeries. Her hands trembled as she called Dana. "Tell me that's not real." "It's real," Dana said. Holloway was running an entire network. He forged wills, redirected estates into shell companies, and used legitimate businesses, like your father's, to make it look clean. Evan wasn't just a thief, Laura. He was a cog in a much bigger machine. Laura swallowed hard. "So my father's company was part of this?" "Not knowingly," Dana reassured. "From what we can tell, Holloway started filtering funds after your father's stroke. He used your brother to keep it quiet. Your dad probably had no idea. Laura closed her eyes, the truth cutting deeper than she expected. Her father, the man who taught her to build trust, had had his legacy turned into a tool for fraud. "Then we clear his name," she said softly. The next morning, she met with Detective Hale and Dana at the precinct. The room buzzed with energy, boxes of files, officers on phones, reporters waiting outside. Hale nodded at her. "We traced financial transfers from Holloway's accounts to multiple business fronts. Bennett Construction was one of the earliest. You were right. Your brother didn't just forge the will. He helped move the money. How much?" Hale hesitated. "About $2.4 million over 3 years." Laura's breath caught. That's impossible," he shook his head. "Not anymore. But here's the part you'll want to see." He handed her a document, a confession statement signed just hours earlier. At the top, it read, "Megan Bennett, née Coleman." Laura scanned the words, her hands shaking. Megan had agreed to cooperate in exchange for leniency. Her statement outlined everything. Holloway's plan, the fake accounts, the bribes, and Evan's growing paranoia. Evan wanted control. Holloway gave him a way to get it. But it wasn't enough for him to have the money. He wanted to destroy Laura too, so no one would question him. Laura's eyes burned with tears she didn't want to shed. She set the paper down. "Where is she now?" "Protective custody," Hale said. "She's giving us access to everything. Bank records, hidden drives, even emails. Thanks to her, the DA's office is filing charges against every single name tied to this." Dana leaned forward. "That includes you, but as a victim, not a suspect. You'll be key to exposing the whole thing." Weeks passed. Investigations expanded. Names came to light, and every truth that had been buried finally surfaced. The Bennett name, once tainted by scandal, became a symbol of integrity reborn. When the first trial began, the courtroom was packed. Evan refused to look at her as he was led in. Thinner, hollow-eyed, defeated. Laura sat quietly, her father's ring around her neck. Her attorney by her side. The judge read the charges: fraud, forgery, conspiracy. When it was over and the guilty verdict was read, Laura didn't feel triumph. She just felt stillness. She closed her eyes and thought of her father, his voice, his laughter, his faith in her. And for the first time since his death, she felt like she'd honored him. Months later, she stood outside the newly rebuilt Bennett Construction, the company restored to her name. A new sign gleamed in the morning sun. The workers she'd rehired stood nearby, waiting. "Your father would have been proud," Frank said quietly, stepping up beside her. Laura smiled. He believed in building things that lasted. She looked out at the horizon, her reflection glimmering on the glass doors. "Now we finally can." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Laura recorded a message for a news segment about the investigation. Her voice was calm, resolute. "Justice isn't always loud," she said. "Sometimes it's quiet, like the truth waiting to be found. You can take everything from someone, their money, their peace, their dignity. But you can't steal what's real. Because no matter how long it takes, truth always finds its way home." She paused, looking straight into the camera. "And in the end, that's the justice that matters." The producer nodded, signaling the end of the take. Laura smiled faintly, whispered a quiet thank you to the empty air, and turned toward the fading light. That night, as rain began to fall softly against her window, Laura looked out at the city, her city, and smiled. The storm was over, and justice at last had found its way. Sometimes the worst betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the people who share your name, your blood, your home. Laura lost everything: her family, her father's legacy, her peace. But what they never understood was that when you take everything from someone honest, you don't break them. You forge them. The truth doesn't need to shout. It waits patiently until the lies collapse under their own weight. And when it finally rises, it burns away everything that was false, because justice isn't just found in courtrooms or verdicts. It's found in every person who refuses to stay silent, in every soul that rebuilds from the ashes. No matter how deep the deceit, no matter how powerful the betrayal, truth always comes home. And when it does, Justice always finds its way.